We are committed in the city of Brampton to make sure that we address this critical issue. And we have heard again and again concern about neighborhoods having slum landlords that really deteriorate the entire neighborhood, and that unfortunately have been a breeding ground for activities and the treatment of vulnerable individuals that is unacceptable. Legal rental units are an essential part of any community, but when you see illegal units that really prey on the vulnerable, it is insidious in a community and it needs to be tackled. This led these three councillors, Councillor Powers, Santos, and Keenan, to take the initiative on launching the RRL, which was utilizing the legal tools we have as municipalities to make sure we crack down on these slum locations. And we wanted to give an update of our efforts. But I want to thank these councillors for really having the courage to tackle an issue that for far too long in Brampton we had turned a blind eye to, and it wasn't acceptable. By requiring smaller rental operators within the identified pilot area to be in compliance with property standards, bylaws, fire and building codes, it holds landlords accountable to providing safe living conditions. The primary goal of this residential rental licensing pilot program is to protect the health and safety of residents. That's what it's about, protecting the health and safety of residents. In wards 1, 3, 4, 5, and 7, landlords operating 1 to 4 rental units are required to obtain a license for each property. These wards were selected because they have historically seen the highest number of violations, the tendency where we saw some of these conditions close to academic institutions. By enforcing stringent safety standards such as installing smoke and carbon monoxide alarms, ensuring proper ventilation, and maintaining safe electrical systems, we are not just adhering to the regulations, we are saving lives. And I have to say, one of the most harrowing things that that I've had to hear as mayor is when I get that call from the fire chief to tell me about another basement fire fatality. And sadly, this happens almost every year. We'll hear about a slum condition that led to vulnerable individuals being in a fire trap, a preventable death that we will not tolerate in our city. We've tried to approach this new initiative in a collaborative fashion, working with the city, having public town halls. The one that I got to attend with Councillor Keenan, massive turnout, probably the largest in-person town hall I've seen. The teletown hall we had was over 7,000 households participated. We wanted to make sure we listened to the city as we approached this initiative. I went door knocking with Councillor Santos in an area that was plagued by some of these illegal units, and every door we heard from was act faster, act swifter to tackle this problem. I know, Councillor Power, you've told me in your area of responsibility in Ward 7 and 8, it's the same feedback, tackle these slum landlords. As we've heard feedback, we've refined the RRL process to make sure that there's not a duplication of forms that need to be submitted, to make it as easy as possible. We actually waived the entire cost of the program in the initial months, and up until September 30th, there continues to be a 50% rebate. We also are arming our city with additional enforcement tools. 38 new bylaw officers are being hired to make sure we have the ability to enforce our own property standards. These enhancements are going to improve the city's ability to address community concerns, including parking and property standards, through education and enforcement. And just to give you a scale of the work that's been involved, since January of this year, we have conducted over 4,700 inspections related to RRL, ARU's parking and property standards, and issued over 611 penalty notices. And so for those residents who want to see this addressed yesterday, who are really, the feedback we're getting is this needs to happen with more energy, with more enthusiasm. The work is happening. You may not necessarily see it immediately. There tends to be news stories about the latest egregious incident. I know there was one that was on Global TV in Peel Village, where we just couldn't believe that the state of that of that potential illegal unit. But the work is happening. That's why I want to reassure residents. 4,700 inspections since January shows how much effort is being put in to tackle this insidious problem. Additionally, we have, I would note, and this is the part that I find really exciting to show the progress we're making. We've issued over 2,200 licenses. So that shows a lot of units are coming into compliance. In terms of the slum landlords that we've heard about, we've actually taken 46 locations where we got numerous complaints about being slum conditions. 46 have now turned into compliance. And that's the goal, is if you have a unit that is a fire trap, that is a safety trap, that we know there is going to be a tragedy here, and we turn it into compliance, that means we've addressed the problems. And so we want to see more of that. I understand that in terms of the worst offenders in the city, we have almost right now, I think it's a 63% have come into compliance. So we have work to do, and we're going to continue to do this work to make sure that residents who are worried about that one rooming house on their street, that one slum landlord in their neighborhood, that we're going to address everyone in the city. It takes time, but we'll make sure that we put the resources behind this project because we are sincere in our commitment to addressing this challenge in our community. And I'm going to say, Councillor Santos, how outspoken you have about the concerns the city's heard about prostitution. You know, you have really taken this message not just locally, but Councillor Santos is on the Federation of Canadian Municipalities executive and has really raised this on a national level. And Councillor Keenan, I know in Peel Village residents are angry. They're up. Angry would be an understatement in terms of how this has been allowed to happen. And I think you have finally been a breath of fresh air for your residents, saying we will not stand for it. And the motions you've been putting forward are recognizing the tools we have as a municipality may not allow us to do everything we want to do. But we're going to use every tool we have to make sure that we can address this problem. And municipalities are creatures of the province, and so there are limits to the controls that we can put in place. But every tool we have will be used to make sure that we can have safe housing conditions in our community. I would also note that even areas outside of our jurisdiction, we are speaking with a united and loud voice on. You know, this initiative, obviously our council was united and behind with RRL, but we also recognize that the international student visa program was out of control. You know, we led a petition to Ottawa to link the visa approval to housing. And we had a special council meeting on this. We had Mike Moffat do a presentation. We had numerous letters sent to the federal immigration minister. I personally met with the minister of universities and colleges provincially about some of these fly-by-night institutions that were having, accreditation. And on that front, our voice is being heard. There's a pause on the international student visa approval process. There's been a public announcement by the Government of Canada they want to see it linked to housing. This was a call that came from Brampton. So we're not just identifying problems, we're proposing solutions. And I look at Algoma, where Algoma is actually building student housing now. They heard the federal announcement and said, okay, we're going to be collaborative, we're going to do our approach, and they've assured the rental supply with the private sector to build student housing. I want to see more of that. I want to see proper student housing built. That's what this is about. If international students come in here and spending $20,000 on tuition and then living in slum dangerous conditions, that's not part of the Canadian dream. There are so many examples of international students achieving extraordinary success in Canada, but it's not fair to allow those conditions to exist. And having an honest conversation about the cost and responsibilities around housing is part of this. And so it's encouraging to see post-secondary education institutions adapting to this change in Ottawa, and I'm sure there's more of that to come. Algoma is being a good example, and I want to see other academic institutions follow that example. So on that note, Councillor Santos is going to say a few words, and we've actually brought some photos behind us to illustrate some of the challenges we're facing. You see some of the photos that we see. You see doors that lead to a staircase that's no longer there. You see conditions where there's clear fire hazards that no fire code in Canada would ever allow to exist. And so when I asked landlords to abide by building code and fire code, it's not too much to ask. Building code and fire code we must abide by, and we thought the photos of what we're seeing would be an illustration of some of the conditions we see in these units. And so these are just a few examples of some of the conditions we see in units, but we have on the slides.
Councillor Keenan's gonna.
Yeah, Councillor Keenan's gonna run through some of these too. But we expect housing to be safe and meet the health and safety standards that we have in Canada, and we're certainly not going to accept squalor-like conditions in our city. So Councillor Keenan will speak, followed by Councillor Santos.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Hello, I'm Councillor Dennis Keenan from Wards 3 and 4. We've heard of the troubling stories of landlords exploiting tenants and taking advantage of vulnerable individuals, and the photos displayed here starkly illustrate those issues. Many individuals, especially international students, face immense pressures such as financial obligations and family responsibilities. And in their search for affordable housing, they may be tempted into situations that they're exploited, deceived, resulting in unsafe living conditions. Our city is home to approximately 100,000 international students who deserve a safe and secure housing. We call on post-secondary institutions to step up and address the housing crisis and invest in accommodations. While some institutions started to make strides in this area, others must follow suit. It is your responsibility to take care of those that you are profiting from. We're here to make it very clear that the exploitation of tenants for personal gain is unacceptable. Unsafe housing conditions are unacceptable. Everybody deserves to live with dignity and respect. These problems extend far beyond the tenants and landlords, impacting our entire community. For instance, residents deal with the frustrations of cars being parked on sidewalks, obstructing their own lawns. We deal with the frustrations of overflowing garbage and debris, which degrade our neighborhoods. They also attract pests that are unwanted. These issues diminish the quality of life for every resident in the city of Brampton. The residential licensing program is crucial to ensuring that all properties, including registered and unregistered ARUs, comply with property, parking, and health and safety standards. We will continue to push the necessary changes and support to guarantee that all residents and students have safe and dignified place to call home. Thank you, and I'll pass it off to Councillor Santos.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Regional Councillor Rowena Santos from Brampton Wards 1 and 5 and Chair of Legislative Services. Provincial mandates and housing targets have put significant pressure on cities like Brampton and other Ontario cities to address the housing crisis. While we acknowledge the need for more housing and the role that ARUs play in taking on the issue, it's important to remember that ARUs alone are not a quick fix or complete solution to the housing crisis. We also need the tools to hold slum landlords accountable, and this is what the RRL program in Brampton is doing. And we are always looking for ways to strengthen it, as the Mayor had mentioned. Through the RRL implementation, we continue to find rentals with excessive and unsafe number of tenants. On Wednesday, we will bring forward a motion to help set occupancy limits to deal with unsafe number of tenants. ARUs must be integrated into complete communities that prioritize safety, quality of life, and long-term sustainability. As we do our part in this city, with all the tools we could possibly have, the provincial and federal governments must also look into funding programs that support municipalities, just like Brampton, who are enforcing the proper construction, maintenance, and licensing of ARUs. Without such support, municipalities will struggle to manage the health and safety issues that we face related to ARUs. And we will be left with slum landlords who think that they can exploit or even prostitute those desperately looking for a place to live. We must ensure that growth is sustainable and beneficial to all residents, And we as a city are committed to building a Brampton that is safe, inclusive, and also resilient. Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Mayor.
So on that note, we're happy to answer any questions you have about this new initiative. Once again, the high-level number is 4,700 inspections, 46 slum conditions brought into compliance, and 2,200 licenses have been issued. And the 50% waiver on the registration fee will continue until September 30th. Obviously, the enforcement of this is a cost on the city. The city doesn't make any funds on this. This is a cost on all taxpayers, the enforcement of illegal units. But we are working collaboratively to make sure everyone can be brought into compliance. And for technical questions, of course, Director Higgs is here to answer those questions.
Any questions?
Good morning. My question is to Councillor Santos. Santos, you mentioned about prostitution and some concerns that you are hearing. Can you just throw some light upon it? Have you come across any issues and concerns that's something related to prostitution that is happening in the city of Brampton?
Yeah, media has been reporting a lot about this lately based on a council meeting from a couple of Wednesdays ago where Councillor Keenan shared some advertisements that were shown on social media in particular, and doing my own search on various rental sites, seeing myself. This is not a new issue. This is part of why we have the International Student Charter. Social agencies like Indus Community Services, PCHS, they've all shown signals about this happening in our community. And seeing ads from landlords or ads on rentals saying that they are going to provide discount on rent if the girls who are tenanting agree to Friends with Benefits. So this is the worst of the worst when it comes to slum landlords, which is why the RRL is so important. Because if landlords are able to get away with bad property standards, grass, garbage overflowing, throwing 4 mattresses in 1 bedroom, if they're able to get away with that, what else are they getting away with?
Listen.
Good morning. Anyone can answer. We have seen some protest on RRL, so we tried to hear them also, and being this is a good program, RRL, because we need change in the Brampton. So why city and these protesters are not on the same page? Because when we try to hear them, they are saying their demands are, RRL is not targeting the illegal landlords. Means city don't have a plan to make illegal basements as legal. They are only targeting the legal basements because the owners already have paid those fees. Also, like the councillors, the Ward 2, 6, 8, 9 and 10, the South Asian councillors, they don't want to accept RRL in their wards, that as per the protesters. So why don't we hear from them, those councillors, South Asian, Councillor Kaur, Councillor Kirat Singh and Councillor Toor, because we want to hear from them also, are they, because these should be in all the 10 wards. If this is a good program, we want change in the Brampton, we don't want to see these kind of pictures, but let's bring it to whole of the Brampton so that if they have any backlash, they should come forward and talk on this. Thank you.
So thank you. I had a few questions there in that question. First of all, this is for all rental units, and so you can have a rental unit that might have been legal 10 years ago that gets altered. And so this gives the city the right to inspect when we have those complaints. And so this is for ensuring that illegal units are brought into compliance. And I would note through the RRL, these 46 slum conditions that were illegal have been brought into compliance. This is exactly what it's for. I know there is a noisy group of about 30 that continue to protest this. In some cases, they've even gone to protest and attempted to protest in the personal spaces of councillors. No matter how noisy and loud the Slum Landlord Association is, we will not bow to the pressure to ignore our requirement that you must meet building code and fire code. I took the time to sit down with this association. I met with the leader of this association in my office, and I said, tell me all your points. We're here to work with everyone. But the points, their perspectives were not based in any form of fact or reality. They said that it was not illegal. I explained that the very similar provision was challenged in Windsor and went to the court, and the court said the municipalities have this right. And so I think some of their objections to this are just simply not based on the laws we have right now in Ontario and in Canada. You know, I've heard feedback from this association saying it's their right, they can pave their entire lawn if they want to, that they don't have to meet fire code. And that's not something we're standing for. We're not going to turn a blind eye to some of these egregious breaches of property standards that we've had. You know, I had one of the members associations say the city has no right to enforce proper ventilation on us. Well, we do when it could potentially lead to a fire fatality. And so, you know, we will continue to try to work collaboratively with everyone. At our council meeting 2 weeks ago, Councillors Brar and Paleshi, speaking of a councillor of South Asian descent, said seeing the success of taking illegal units into compliance, that they wanted to be added to the pilot project. I would note when this pilot project started, it was based on the wards that had significant academic institutions. And it just happened to be that some of our larger academic institutions were obviously in the downtown area, in the wards 1 and 5 and 3 and 4, and now in 7 and 8. In the east end of the city, they asked for more of a time to watch this because there are some cases of multi-generational living. But you know, I do believe that this has been very successful, and so when I hear, you know, the ward councillors in wards 2 and 6 say because of the success they want to be part of it, I'm not surprised. This is what we thought would happen. Why wouldn't you want to see property standards enforced?
Thank you. Mayor, there were a few reports in the public domain about extra expenses by city staff and councillors. First was the trip to Ireland. We had 2 councillors with the staff. They spend 2,500 per day per person. And then on Canada Day, 600,000 spent for a single artist. So can you justify these expenses where it could have been done in a lower cost? Thank you.
So obviously, the city of Brampton believes in being frugal with all expenses, and we look at ways to recoup cost. In terms of Canada Day, this is our 50th birthday as a city and a region appeal, and we wanted to have a great Canada Day celebration. And when we put on Canada Day, we try to recoup as many costs as possible through sponsorships. So we've got some great corporate sponsors that enable us to put on great events. And in the case of the Canada Day artists this year, they actually brought their own sponsor to sponsor the event. I believe they brought a single sponsorship that helped present the front stage at $160,000 from one sponsorship. And so these events also generate revenue, and so when you see the cost of a show, it doesn't necessarily reflect the sponsorship that's brought in. And on Canada Day, because of the vendor booths that we rent, because of parking fees, because of the sponsorships of every aspect of Canada Day, you know, the actual figures are very different than the one that was reported in that one web article. I would note, though, we do want to put on a great Canada Day show. And every year we have a budget for New Year's Eve. And Canada Day, we've since added Diwali as well. And we want to put on a great show. Our most well-attended city event of the year is always Canada Day. We live in the greatest country in the world, and whatever challenges we have, you know, we'll handle. But at the same time, I think we've won a lottery ticket to have the incredible pleasure to live in this country. And on Canada Day, we want to celebrate that with pride, and we had a great show this year. We look forward to having great shows in the years ahead. And thank you to all the corporate sponsors that made this possible. And you know, there was, I think, almost a dozen corporate sponsors that enabled this event.
And about the Ireland trip also, like any investment came?
So yes, and thank you, Councillor Keenan and Paleshi. I was asked, we have a great sponsor, we have a great relationship with the head of the Web Summit, Paddy Cosgrove, and there's an emerging tech sector in Ireland. I would note they actually hosted the first day of Collision in Brampton this year, which was really exciting. And publicly, he's been speaking about Brampton's Innovation District and how we lean in on startups. I'm so proud that the relationship we have built with him is one that led to Collision to actually be in Brampton. I would note that next year they're going to Vancouver, and good on Vancouver for being able to attract that international conference that attracts the largest gathering of tech companies in the world. I was asked to speak at that conference in Dublin. I wasn't able to because my schedule was so tight here, and at the last minute, Councillor Keenan and Pelleshi were able to step up, and so I thought that trip was misrepresented, but grateful that we have a Team Brampton approach in the city where everyone steps up to help out. I wish I could be everywhere myself, but I can't. And so this council keeps a very busy schedule to make sure we can cover every opportunity for the city. And you know, we had a council report that was presented on some of the investment that's coming to our city because of the MOUs that were signed.
Thank you.
Good morning, Jaspreet from Omni News. Councillor Santos, coming back on that Facebook Marketplace ad, so what's the authenticity of that ad, that they are real or the fake? And is there any investigation we can see in the future that these kinds of people will be prosecuted?
Thanks for that question. I think the media are doing a fantastic job investigating the situation. I know that I spoke to Omni News just on Thursday or Friday, I believe it was, where they actually spoke directly to an international student girl who experienced exactly what we were describing. And so the situation here is that many of these girls are afraid to speak out because they're afraid they're going to be deported. They're afraid of the shame that comes with it. Many of them reach out to social agencies directly, which is where I received my information from years ago before we did our work on the International Student Charter. And so in terms of investigations, I'm sure with the Human Trafficking Unit with Peel Regional Police, they'll be looking into this as well. But congratulations to all of you in the media for rightfully exposing what some of these slum landlords are doing.
Yeah, and just to add to that, you know, there is a zero tolerance with the Peel Police for this type of ugly, predatory behavior. And if, you know, I would say to anyone watching this, and if you know of incidents, if you know of a friend who's being preyed upon, taken advantage of, please report it to the Peel Regional Police. Obviously, you know, they would fully investigate incidents that are being reported, and of course the investment that's being made into Safe Place Peel. If there is individuals who feel hopeless and are being taken advantage of, if you reach out for help, help will be there to help you get out of this predatory environment. And the reason Councillor Santos has had the courage to speak out about this is to make sure that no one feels hopeless, that we will not tolerate these type of conditions. And thank you for speaking with unequivocal strength on the fact that we will not tolerate this in our city or our region or in Canada.
And I have one clarification question. So coming on the task force, so as per my knowledge, bylaw officers are not allowed to go inside the property. And these pictures are from inside the properties. But how can bylaw officers make sure that these conditions will not be seen in future? So
due to RL, they have the right to go inside. And this was important, this is an important distinction of RL. Previously, that ability to go inside was very legally restrictive, but as treating these rental units as businesses, it gives us the right to inspect the safety standards of that business. It's why this project designed by the councillors is so innovative, because it truly gives the city tools within our legal jurisdiction to enforce property standards. You know, hearing about a slum landlord and not being able to enter essentially left our bylaw officers with no tools to address the illegal secondary units. Now we have the tool to address them. 46 slum landlords are gone from our city, and we're on pace to make sure we tackle every one. It's going to take time, but we will not relent. No matter how loud and noisy the protest is, we will not relent in making sure that the remaining slum landlords in our city are addressed into compliance. That's the goal. If there is, you know, a ventilation issue that could lead to a fire, if there is a door that leads, you know, to no staircase, if there are occupancy limits that are out of control, the goal is to bring these units into compliance. That's all we want, to make sure that housing units in the city meet building code and fire code. In terms of the process of the training and the new equipment, Director Higgs can speak to that. And in terms of the 311, that would be under a Legislative Services Commissioner, and obviously additional resources are being given to 311 to deal with the volume of calls as well. part of the volume of calls is frustration that you call about that same illegal unit 100 times and it's still there. That same slum landlord is still there. The good news is with these new legal tools, for the first time we're actually able to start to see some of these slum landlords brought into compliance. But over to Director Higgs on the process of the additional bylaw enforcement officers and when they will start.
And can I just also confirm those positions haven't been posted yet? The same question for
Good morning and thank you for the question. Absolutely, council saw a need and absolutely leaned into it and was able to authorize us getting 38 enforcement officers to shore up the resources of bylaw. It was identified at the time that one of the linchpins of that is that we also need vehicles for them to drive around in. And anyone that's bought a vehicle recently recognizes that that's not a quick process. But I'm happy to say that with the mayor's office and council's assistance, we've been able to move that process along much quicker than anticipated. The vehicles will be arriving October 1st. So hiring is going on rapidly now. There is a process, so the external public positions have not yet been posted, but the hiring process is underway. I anticipate in six weeks or so, we'll be at full complement, which is absolutely where we want it to be.
And just another question, I think you might be better to answer that. There's 4,700 inspections related to RLEs, but again, how many complaints are you seeing? Is there a high volume that has added? I know there's been inspections based on those complaints, but how many complaints were there?
So as far as, just to clarify, those inspections were related to RRL and ARU, additional residential units. We approach this from a holistic manner in which we address the larger problem. So a lot of those inspections had to do with streetscape inspections, and because of that, getting a concise stat as to how many complaints. I don't have the specific number, but I can absolutely dig into that for you.
Actually, I think Councillor Santos has some updated numbers she can share on the complaints.
So, just in an example, I know that in 311, the highest number of complaints in the month of July, just July, was actually parking. And as you all know, our residents, and Councillor Keenan certainly shared, that many of our residents who live next door to a rental property has cars that are overflowing into the street, too many cars in the driveway. So parking is one of the biggest complaints. Number one complaint in July was parking, at a total of 8,000 complaints just for the month of July. And then after that, the second highest number of complaints is property standard related, which was at, I think, about 1,700. So the number of complaints that we're getting, and a good chunk of them are RRL or rental unit related, right? Not all of them, most of them are. It's a high number of complaints that we deal with, which is why the RRL program and pilot is so important, so that we could be proactive in addressing a lot of these concerns.
And just hearing from Director Higgs to add, in terms of the pace of the 38 officers, part of our collective agreement obligations are to provide opportunities for internal staff initially, and I believe about half the positions are being filled by internal candidates. And one advantage of that is that it leads to a faster uptake. And so when you say those positions will be filled in 6 to 8 weeks, that's for both internal and external hires. And so we should be in full operation in less than 2 months with those new additional tools. I consider that very impressive. If there is 200 different distinct neighborhoods in the city. I know I'm part of about 100 different WhatsApp groups where there's neighborhood discussions. Every neighborhood tends to have 1 or 2 slum locations. And so what that number is in terms of, there are good landlords out there. Mm-hmm. What we're talking about is the worst of the worst. And so, based on the complaints we've got, we've been able to address 63% of them. And so, there's thousands of rental units. We're not suggesting that they're all in egregious condition. There is a small number in our city, but unfortunately there's 1 or 2 in every neighborhood that brings the entire neighborhood into disrepute. And so the fact that of the ones we've had the most ferocious complaints about, 63% are in compliance, this RRL is working. And I hope I can report back at our next update that all the identified slum landlords in the city have been brought into compliance, but it takes work. And bylaw is stepping up to enable this, and the fact that 46 slum conditions have been removed from our city is a major win for proper housing in our city. That's a reason to celebrate. I would not look down upon 46 landlord locations from being removed. Imagine there was a fire in each one of those units and the potential toll and gravity of that. Imagine some of the, if these were some of the locations where we had vulnerable international students being preyed upon. Thank goodness those are no longer locations where that can happen. So based on the complaints, we've been able to get 63% into compliance. Listen, there may be other spots we haven't heard about. It's not a definitive list, but of the ones that we are addressing right now, 63% have been brought into compliance. No, so the city has the right to enter. If you are operating a business, an illegal rental unit out of your property, and you may intentionally not want to be part of RRL because you know you don't meet building code and fire code, we still have the right to enter that unit because you're operating an illegal business out of your property.
Okay. For Councillor Keenan, the motion that was just mentioned there about the driveway restrictions, which would essentially sort of put a pause on approvals for ARUs in overflow areas. Now, my understanding is that's been deferred. I'm just curious as to where that's going, if it's going anywhere, or what's happening with that.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So we deferred it to open up some more dialogue with the province, given some, interpretations of the Planning Act. We just want to make sure that they're on board with what it is that we're trying to do. We are creatures of the province, and they do have a responsibility as well. So we're leaning on them to stick with us in what we're trying to do. So that's the reason for the deferral right now.
And Graham, I could just add to that because I've been having active conversations with the province on this and the local minister, Pramit Sarkaria. I think the province rightly has recognized this international student visa approval process was out of control and there wasn't proper housing. I know Prob certainly recognizes that, but we're looking at which tools we have legally as a municipality. It's why we have a committee meeting and then a council meeting to address some of those, to reconcile the aspirations of council within the legal framework that we have to operate. And it appears around controlling, people paving over their entire front lawn. In terms of occupancy limits, those are certainly within our right as a city. And so to make sure that wherever we land on this, in terms of the areas that are identified as sort of student overflow zones where there's, around these academic institutions, that we have a bylaw that is passed that is that if ever challenged would meet the thresholds under the Ontario Planning Act and the Ontario Municipal Act. But there is certainly more we can do, and I believe this week Councillor Santos will be addressing some of those improvements as well.
Just about that occupancy limit thing, is there not already occupancy limits in place? I thought bylaws already had some sort of threshold of it.
So if you could speak to the existing, Director Hayes, to the existing.
So the specific occupancy as it relates to these premises is not listed in the bylaw currently.
Hearing none, thank you for joining us today for the update, and we'll make sure to share the next update with you as well on the city's unequivocal commitment to address slum landlords in our city. Thank you.